Thank you. Shkoa. So I say today what happens many times is people who are far away don't often go to a funeral. Let's say sometimes there are relatives far away who hear about a funeral but they can't go, like an older people or something. So the question is when do they actually start sitting Shiva? Okay? So he quotes here, actually, it's a likud of sorts. He says, Rav Moshe Feinstein writes that they should start their Avelus right away. They're not going to the funeral. Right, they start their Avelus right away because, as far as they're concerned, it's like they walked away from the mace. They're not traveling, so as far as they're concerned, they have nothing to do, and therefore Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva, Nigras Moshe, and Rav Voshner has the same concept with Shevet Levi, that they should start Avelus Miyad. He says, however, the Netziv and Rav Meir Arik, also a modern postig in the Amir Yosher, writes that they should start from Kvura, and
what does immediately mean there?
Immediately means before the Kvura takes place.
Before
the Levaya.
Before the Levaya.
Right. Okay.
But they're in a different city.
Right. So in other words, they're in a different city. They're not going. It's not like they're traveling and they're coming late. So therefore, let's say they get the news someone passed away at 7 o'clock. The Levaya is not till, let's say, 2 o'clock. They're not intending to go. They start right away. According to other shitos, they start from the time of Kvura. And so it's a machlokas lalach in the poskim what it actually is. The difference, of course, will be.
Well, I suppose only toward the evening or something.
What will be the real difference? What are the chayv and mitzvos?
Right. Otherwise, they're an
right.
onain.
So otherwise they're an onain. So if they're an onain and they're waiting to kfura, they're not chayv and mitzvos. So actually, the Rav Meir Arik and others write that even though, and he quotes actually from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that even though they're really an onain until kfura, but because they're not involved in anything for the mace, they're an onain, but they're not an onain. So therefore, they're chayv and mitzvos for everything like anything else, except of course the mitzvah of the first day, which is going to be tefillin, which in Ovel would be pater for as well. So whatever they would be, the real difference between the two shitos is really minimal.
Right.
Right. The question is what. So that's all.
Well, unless it's the next day for some reason, it's late in the day. Or
correct. So you could have a difference of a day, I suppose. But you
could be up to 3 days. But for the time it takes them to go to Kfura,
they're not going. They're not going because it could be a longer period of time until they actually do the Kfura. That's correct. It could be today. You get the news, and for whatever reason they delay the Kfura till tomorrow. You're right. That could be another difference. So that was one whole piece. And then we had a discussion: do you paskin like this? And now we had an excursus talked about treifas, and then we talked at the very end of this. There's 3 lines at the end of the Amud. I'll call a mason kula matcha mitasa reis mishubach. For all of the mason, if you kind of accelerate burial, it's good. And avi ve'imo hareis maguna. However, for your mother and father, you should slow down the process. We really don't understand what it means. I went back to look it up. What it really means is in terms of espedim. It doesn't mean actually you should delay the funeral. It means that the value there are 2 values here. One value is of course via shova aretz you're returning the body. So the primary value there is to do the kfur as best as possible. The same thing is also covered a mace by giving hespedim. So you got to balance them out. So with a regular mace, you do a little bit of hespedim. Right now, the hespedim then were much different than today because they really were tear jerkers. They were really like emotional kinds of things. I don't want to say it's not emotional today, but kal v'chomer ben v'noshe kal v'chomer then. However, with a parent, the more that you are going to emote and the more that you're going to delay the actual kvura because of all the espedim shows a greater cover for your parents. That's what it means. It really doesn't mean that you're going to delay the funeral for whatever reason because you have to have a bigger flowers or whatever. So that's, and then the Gemara adds finally, it says, however, Erev Shabbos or Erev Yom Tov, that you should not delay that because you want to finish in time for Yom Tov. Otherwise, we're afraid the funeral may not be finished in time or may be pushed off till after Yom Tov. So therefore, even though for parents to accelerate it, Madche Harei Zeh Meshubach. Okay, B'Shein Osel Kvod Avi V'Imo. Okay. Then it says as follows: Kol Hamesim Kulam Ratzim Amayit B'Isko Ratzim Ein Amayit B'Isko Ratzim Amayit. So for all other relatives, one should minimize the amount of time that one goes to work. Okay.
What does that mean?
So in other words, it's actually.
You're not supposed to go to work at all, are you? except those few cases of people who were starving or whatever.
Right. So that's the difficulty with this. And it seems to imply that you actually could go to work when you're dealing with other kinds of availers. And right, so
it's up to you. So if you want to do or not do. Is that what
correct.
It
So the Rishonim say it's actually talking about a davar avod, so where the work actually has to be done. So
right.
even for a pair, so with the davar avod, we're going to let you say you have the option of getting it done, because if you don't do it now, you'll suffer
right.
serious loss. Mm-hmm. With your parents, you can't. Okay, so in other words, this is saying even though it's a davar avod, you're going to take it on the chin as a way of kibbut ava aim. There's Yerushalmi. It actually says something even more radical. The Yerushalmi says that the covered for parents for working or not working extends even to Shloshim Yom. Okay, or a similar thing that we have, for example, for hair cutting, for a parent, right? It's either going to be what happens in 30 days for a parent for cutting your hair. Doesn't make a difference. We have to wait shigaru bo chavero. People tell you look disheveled, so it has to be that people have to say, buddy, it's time to go to work. You don't go to work, the business is going to go mechula. So but that's a very radical approach. That's Yerushalmi says that we would say, of course, that a novel should not go to work on Shiva, and for parents, surely should not go on Shiva.
But the word mema'eh really doesn't imply. That seems to minimize. That's the question. It doesn't even say.
So the Nemuki Yosef and the other say it's talking about davar avod that has to be done. So even then
it's a mema'eh.
And then Rabbeinu Chananel actually says afilu hu ayidei acherim. So Rabbeinu Chananel says means you can't even, for a parent, you can't even have someone else do it for you, which is a big chiddush.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So for example, what would it really mean? Really want to know what it means in modern context means that you would sell the business. I've heard this. People like you sell.
Yeah, what you're saying, if you can't,
like you sell the chametz,
you have employees.
I see.
No, you sell the business for that week, and it's not just selling the business. It means you sell the business to someone. The profits of that week go to that person. The reason not to close the business is if you close the business, you'll suffer a greater loss. Right?
Well,
you work out some kind of thing that.
There's also the question of your employees. They make a living from this. That's a whole other layer of
you can't just close the business and expect to come back after 8 days and find the customers are still there, or maybe a service industry. So therefore, there are ways in which people do it, or they kind of do some harama. I don't know. This used to be more frequent, by the way, 50, 60 years ago for Shabbos too. People would sell the businesses for Shabbos. Now, okay, not so simple. All right. Now the next thing here is something that the Rishonim say we don't do. Let me tell you what it says. I'll tell you what the interpretations are, and then I'll tell you. You'll know right away we don't do it. At least according to some of the interpretations. Kol mesim kulam rotza choletz rotza ena choletz. Now what does choletz means? Choletz means to take off or to bear. Okay, to bear, to B-A-R-E, to remove.
Bear what?
Like for example, chalitza.
Yeah, chalitza.
The active called chalitza is called. What are we taking off? Taking off the shoe. Beit chalutz anal.
Right.
So what are we taking off here?
We do with the same was used for tefillin.
And tefillin, correct.
And shoes for that. Shoes and tefillin is used like chalitza, right?
Correct. We know like shoes on a veilus, you mean?
Generally.
Yeah.
Like,
yes, correct.
I said, you put on your right shoe before your left shoe, but taking it off, it doesn't matter, or whatever it is.
Right. So, and in fact, the Rush says, you'll see that it doesn't really appear to be correct, because it's usually subsumed on other things. The Rush says, when it means about choletz, it means taking off your shoes for now. You say, but everybody takes off their shoes. So because you're going to see in a moment, it looks like a difference between parents and other mesim.
Yeah.
So the Rush says it means not just taking off your shoes when you're at an ovel.
Right.
It means taking off your shoes before.
Before what?
Before you go to the funeral, before you're still there.
The
minute you go, everything. In other words, you're showing the sadness even before the avelis takes place, when you're actually doing halvas hameis. Right? I think I told you once when I went for the levaya for my mother. I'd never seen this before. They made us take off our shoes at the cemetery, but this was after the kfura, after the kever was finished.
Because you're ready in Ovel.
But you're ready in Ovel. Right, that's it. The shoes go off. Right. And all the Israelis knew to bring sneakers and running shoes, and I didn't. You have to see on the streets, the roads are full of rocks and pebbles. It's extremely difficult at night, especially. You can't see them. So, but the bottom line was that's not the halacha then. This means that even before, means if we followed this according to the Rush, when we went to the cemetery, we would have taken our shoes off.
Even from before you went to the cemetery.
But most Rishonim don't give that shot. Most Rishonim talk about choletz here, means that you are bearing your shoulder. In other words, you're taking off that you're as if to say you'd be like think of taking off your jacket when you're putting on tefillin. Right. So you're bearing one shoulder, which we never do, and the reason is because probably our garments are really not meant for it. And if you were wearing a toga,
we're going to say with a toga, maybe
wearing a toga, it makes sense. Right now, it's embarrassing to be disrobed somewhat, but at least it's more ad hoc. But as opposed to what we're doing today, so it looks like it either means that they're bearing a shoulder, or according to other Rishonim, there's a Rashi in Ksav Yad. That means you're taking off your actually top clothing altogether, which is very radical. Most Rishonim seem to say that you're rearranging the top garment to show the shoulder itself.
Well, again, in those days, how can I say? Even today, if you see a person doing a certain thing, or you draw conclusions from it. Right. So maybe in those days, if you walked around with your shoulder bare, and you were Jewish, and you normally didn't do that, they might have known right away your parents died.
That's what it meant. That's correct.
That's what I'm saying.
That's right.
It's like everybody knew. You walk with a bare shoulder, must mean your parents died.
Right. I mean, it's like saying once upon a time you saw people with a scraggly beard, you know they were in shloshim. Today means nothing in our society.
Right.
Great.
Yeah, no, that's right.
So at any rate, the Rishon already pointed out that we don't do this anymore. Though there is, so in the Shulchan Aruch though mentions that there's a minhag of Sfaradim who still carried out in his time. But if you look around, you've never seen it. It has clearly fallen to disuse among Ashkenazim, and in fact, I think most have never seen it. And the reason probably is because it's just not, our garments don't work that way. Like a lot of other things, such as Atifas Harosh, where they would cover their heads, or Kfiyas Hamita, which it didn't work. So all this is about partially because our garments don't work that way, and second of all, we live in a non-Jewish society, and we're always worried what they're going to think about the crazy Jews. We do enough crazy things, right? So that's what choletz, and the value once again that you have to balance off is, once again, this was seen as a sign of mourning, right? Like ripping a garment is going to be a sign of mourning. Like not wearing shoes is a sign of mourning. Disrobing garments are something that we use to make ourselves enhanced. All types of garments are really meant to make us look nicer. The Ovel, who is in the opposite type of state, is going to do all kinds of anti-acts to do that, to bring that across. The value that works against it, besides the fact that our garments don't work that way, is it's depraving to walk around undressed. Right? And you'll see in a moment that this appears in terms of dealing with Talmidei Chachamim. So at any rate, for all of the mesim, I'll call mesim kulam matzah choletz matzah eno choletz. Allah v'vimo choletz. For other mesim, you can do it. You don't do it. It's fine. But for your parents, you have to do it. Sign of kavod. U'maaseh begadol hadar echad shemeis aviv ubikesh lachlot. So there was once a case, and we'll see in a moment who it was, because there are two people not sure if A is A and B is B, or A is B and B is A. Where it was an individual Gadol Hadar, whose father died. He wanted to do it. Ubikesh Gadol Hadar acher she'imo lachlot v'nimna. And there was another Gadol Hadar there who wanted to do it not because it was the father who died, right, but because a great scholar died. So the first ones, and v'lo chalat, and the first one didn't do it because he didn't want the second person to embarrass himself. So we have two people here, A and B. A's father died. A wants to do chalitza or choletz seifo, but he doesn't do it because the other person with them, who looks like there's a greater gadol, would also do it, or an equal gadol, and therefore he doesn't do it for himself to make sure the other person doesn't do it as well.
He doesn't want to force the other person somehow to do it.
Or he feels if he doesn't do it, the other person won't do it as well. If he'll do it, the other person will do it. And now, which either means, for him, he was either not as great as the other person, so it was not so much of a pagam, a deprivation of himself, or it could mean that people would understand it was his father. Obviously, he's going to do it. The other guy, it's simply a gadol adar. There's less of a reason for it. So, and obviously, the Gemara, the value here is that there's a kavod amaze for doing this, even though we don't do it today. So that's the case. We don't know who's who. So, but we know the Avel wanted to do it, didn't do it, in order to make sure the non-Avel wouldn't do it. So who are these people? Amar Abaye, gadol adar Rabbi, gadol adar she'imo Rabbi Yaakov Baracha. So, who is the Avel? Rabbi, whose father was Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, and he was going to do chalitza sakosef, but he didn't do it because Rav Yaakov Baracha was going to do it with him at the same time. Rav Yaakov Baracha was not a real Avel. Another have a version the other way around. God lador Rav Yaakov Baracha. God lador she'imo Rabbi. No, it wasn't the father of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi who died. It was the father of Rav Yaakov Baracha, who obviously Acha, right? And Acha was I guess a simple guy. Or Rabbi Yaakov Baracha is clearly not as great as Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Right. So the first one, the second version is that the Avel is the lesser scholar. He wanted to do it for his father, like Mitchie did for his father, but he didn't do it because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was with him, and he wanted to also do the kavod amaze, and for Rabbi Yehuda Nasi to do it would be a pagam. For Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was really the gadol hadar. So that's what Gemara says. Gemara says, okay, we have the two versions. Which one is more logical? According to the second version, I understand. Rav Yaakov Bar Acha was the Avel. He didn't do it because he saw that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wanted also to bear his shoulder. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, to bear his shoulder in front of everybody, is a degradation of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the greatest scholar of that generation. That makes sense. Right. But what about the other way around? Laman di Amar Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha. But according to the opinion that the second scholar who was not the Avel was Yaakov Bar Acha, Amayin Nimna v'lo chalatz. Why did Rebbe not do chaletz? Because not just that Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha was a lesser scholar, Rav Shimon Gamliel Nasihave v'kulam l'mechayv l'michlatz. The father of Rebbe was the Nasi of the entire generation. Mm-hmm. So it would be logical that everybody would do chalitza sakosef, not only family relatives. Everybody was in mourning. We'll see at the bottom of the page what happens when a Basin dies, what happens when a Nasi dies. They close up the Beis Medrash. Everybody is mourning, right? It's not just it's a
scenario we have here is that Rebbe's father died.
Well, there are two scenarios.
We're talking about this
Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's father died, who is Rav Shimon Gamliel.
Right.
Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was going to do chalitza sakosef.
Right.
He stops because Rav Acha Bar Yaakov was going to do it. So the Gemara says that doesn't make sense.
It makes sense. So
the Gemara doesn't have a question. The Gemara says, and the answer is kasha. But bleibt mit der kasha. We don't have an answer.
I couldn't see the answer.
Right, so I couldn't see. There is no answer. The Gemara is saying that we have these two traditions. Obviously, you realize how traditions were passed along. Traditions were passed along in almost like a shorthand form. Right? I mean, we're used to reading Rav says this and Shmuel says this. In many cases, they probably had Rav and Shmuel, one says A and one says B. People understood who was what, or could extrapolate. In fact, many times we'll have Echad Omar Zen, Echad Omar Zen, we don't know who it is. There's a similar kind of case. There was a story. The story was two Rebbe and Rabbi Yaakov. Who is who? Not that important. They couldn't remember. Okay, next halacha. Okay, but this is something that we don't do, and you realize in the story the balance between kavod amace and kavod Torah. Okay, next thing. This is about taking a haircut or cutting your hair, or whatever it is. I'll call a mesim kula mistapar lachalamad yom. For all mesim, you have to wait for 30 days in order to take a haircut. Okay. Allah vivimo achiga robo chaverov. Until your friends kind of give you reproof that it's time to get a haircut. Okay, so how long is Yigaro Bo Chaverov? Okay.
Well, it must depend on how fast your beard, how fast your hair grows.
Correct. So it's so there's a number of discussions about this. The first thing is, it of course does relate to how long your beard is. So it varies anywhere from 3 months, that's probably the outside, to twice as long as you normally take a haircut. And the assumption was that people normally took a haircut every 30 days. So it'll be 2 months. Let's say you haven't taken a haircut every 2 months. So you go maybe 4 months. Okay? The other thing is, when does it really start from? This is something we normally don't think about because we normally wait for actually the actual Gara Bochaverov. I remember when I was in Avelis for, I can't remember my father and my mother, and I can't remember how far it was after Shloshim, but someone said to me, okay, I want to tell you look like a bum, now you can go get a haircut, okay?
This is a good friend.
A good colleague, okay? He said, I want to tell you, I see B'yigaro Chavero. So the question is really, though, if you're looking at a shear, when does the shear start? In other words, if you say it's actually physically when someone's going to tell you, fine, but not always the people are so nice to say go get a haircut. Sure. So what actually is that? So let's assume it's 3 months. Is it 3 months from the last haircut, or 3 months from when the Avelis began? Okay, so that's machlokas. It's a machlokas. And the question is, if there's a regel, if there's a yontif in the middle, does the yontif really make a difference? And the answer is probably not. Okay, the answer is probably not, and because it's not a concept that a yontif cuts the avelis. This is not about cutting the avelis. This is really saying that you shouldn't take a haircut all year, except until you look like a bum. It's the fact that it happens to be yontif and you want to look nicer. You take a haircut the day after yontif, right? The next question is, after the first time they tell you, okay, or is this the Yigarobo Chaverov, and then you can get a haircut every 30 days, or is this a halacha for 12 months? That's also machlokas in the poskim. In other words, do you have to wait every time? Do you say that once I waited 3 months, 4 months, 2 months, and I took that first haircut, now the spell is broken, and I go back to becoming a regular hair cutter every month? Or do you say that no, you still got to wait until either it's every 2 months, 3 months, or until people tell you look like a bum, and therefore that's going to be for the entire 12 months? And that's the better way to look at this. I mean, once again, there are reasons that people can't look like bums for a lot of professional reasons. But if you can, extend the haircut during an avelis, during a year of mourning, that seems to be the ideal way. Okay, so that's the machlokas about once again kol hamesim versus parents. Next one, al kol hamesim kulam nichnas lebeis hasimcha. For all the other mesim, it looks like that you can go into a beis hasimcha. I'm sorry, lachar shloshim yom, after shloshim yom. Alav avimo leachar yudreis yud beis chodesh. Once again, for parents, there's a very famous halacha, right? It comes up all the time. People who are navelis for a parent, right? Then they have the whole year to kind of work through what they do for simchas. They come, they go, they wish mazel tov, they leave, they all that. It's always very difficult, very difficult. Rabbi Moshe has a tshuva which most people don't quote because it's a very gender-based tshuva. Let's see if I remember what it is. He writes. You got to be very careful. I wouldn't say this too loud. Okay.
See if the camera's working.
He writes. It's not a secret. He says that a woman who's married is permissible to accompany her husband even during the year, right?
If she's in
avelis, okay, because he wouldn't feel comfortable going without his wife. He doesn't talk about the reverse scenario. But in other words, he feels it's a shalom bayis issue, which is going to trump kibbud av va'em. It's really what he breaks it down to. And he feels that a husband going without his wife would be a greater violation of shalom bayis. I'm not sure I fully understand it. I'm not sure I fully understand it in weddings today that are separate seating with a mechitz in the middle. right? Because reality is they come in together, leave together. Though I do understand it, because if they don't come in together, people begin talking about why is he with that? Okay. So
well, now they have separate entrances.
True. I understand. No, but I understand it's important for a couple to come together and leave together. It's making a statement or not making a statement. And at the same time, he suggests, and by the way, and it's not just simply about gender-based and sexist. He actually points out that if you look at the Gemara Maseches Kedushin, about I think it's Lamed Beis Lamed Gimel, it says Ish Imo v'Aviv Tiro.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Rashi quotes it's a Mechilta, or it's actually Rashi's quoting the Gemara Kedushin. Ish Imo v'Aviv Tiro. Yeah. So why is it Tiro?
Fear.
No, why is it Lashon Rabim? Why is it Lashon Rabim?
Oh.
Because it's Echad Ish v'Echad Isha. So then the Gemara says, so why is it Ish?
What do you mean Echad Ish?
In other words, it's a mitzvah.
You mean saying both
male
right.
children and female children are obligated. So why? That's Tiro. So why? And that's now why it's Aviv and Imo before Imo. That's a separate question. But why does the pasuk begin by Ish, which is Lashon Yachid?
Right.
So Rashi, I believe Rashi says, if not it's in the Gemara, Rashi that it says that when a woman gets married, she has to sublimate her kibbut avoim to the covered for a Baal. And if the two are, hopefully, in most cases, the two can work together, right? But if you go back, especially to the ancient world, it happens even today, where the husband takes the wife away from her family, may move far away, right? So she can't always be machabed kibbut avaim, right? Now, you say, well, that could happen to the husband too, but that's his decision, right? In an ancient society which was very gender-based, with men went to work and had to make a living, usually it was the man who decided where he was going to move. Right? And in fact, the whole story of Yaakov with his wives, right? He takes his wives eventually away from Lavan. Correct? Aram Ovid Avi. We're going to say in a couple of weeks. Lavan actually wanted to keep the wives there with Yaakov.
Sure.
And Yaakov realized he has to break away, so he goes back to where he comes from. Or the case of Rivka goes to Yitzchak. So it makes a whole lot of sense. That's normally what happened. So the bottom line is, because of that, you see that the woman's kibbut avoim is secondary to her husband, to respecting her husband. Ergo, if the husband is not an ovel and the wife is an ovel, he writes that she should accompany him. Okay, because it's kibbut av, because this part is a kibbut avoim mitzvah. Because the Avelis Yud Beis Chodesh is based upon that. It's fascinating. Once again, I said it's hard to. It's not the kind of thing you want.
It might be only if the husband insists. You see, maybe.
Of course. So first of all, the fifth Chelik Shulchan Aruch says the husband should have enough common sense to say you don't have to come. Right. There are all kinds of ways to work this out. There's a great kibbut kvod ishto too. Exactly. So I'm saying in the scenario that was being presented to him, when it's actually tshuva that was written, and they want to know what to do. This is how, and he realized they weren't going to get together. Right. Okay. So therefore, we have the Beis Hamikdash is out of bounds for Yud Beis Chodesh.
Right.
Okay. So what is it called Beis Simcha? What's a Beis Simcha? And what's a Beis Simcha is a real good question, because the Gemara is going to now introduce a secondary, a lower category. Amar Rabba Bar Bachana, Ula Simchas Mareus. Okay. So he says, and there's something called with this Simcha Mareus is permissible. It looks like it's permissible for him to go. So
they're going to tell us what a Simcha Mareus is eventually, or
it means it is. You'll see in a moment what it is. It explains a little bit. But Re'im are friends.
Right?
It's some kind of friendship Simcha that people get together. Think of this as a mahjong group. Think of it as a group that gets together every month. Think of it as hosting dinners, a group that each one hosts dinners to the other. So that's what it's a group that's getting together to share camaraderie.
Right.
It's not like you're getting together for a Beis Hamikdash which had a specific purpose, a wedding, right, or another life cycle event, specifically a wedding. So this seems to say that Simchas Mareus is therefore going to be, right, and Rashi says, Suda she'osim reim v'ahuvim zeh im zeh.
Okay, so yeah.
Okay, and what's the difference? Lo have simcha kol kach. Right?
Right.
Abasuda
They
the
don't
simcha
They
can
don't
go
have
in the
musicians,
sunlow.
they don't have bands, whatever.
Okay. Now, see, you could actually there are actually different eschos in this Gemara. What does it mean for is Simchas Moreus permissible, or Simchas Moreus not permissible when you read this? Because it doesn't really say. We read
It should be the reverse, right?
You could argue the reverse, and how would you argue that?
I would say that because of the mitzvah associated with a wedding,
Right. Correct. Yeah. Say it.
you should go and attend that and not the Miriam.
Correct. So it's exactly the point. You could argue the other way around, that maybe you should go. Simchas Meres is not that important. See, you miss the Simchas Meres. Who's going to die? But you're going to miss the wedding. Oy yoy, chasna kala, mitzvah sameach chasna kala, right? Kala nama chasuda. How could you miss that?
Except that this follows the first statement just before this said, you can't go to a BAYT simcha. That sounds like a real big simcha for 12 months. And then Rabbi Archana says, and also, not also, but then he says, well, the Simchat Mrei, it sounds like he's saying,
Right.
and that rule of not 12 months also applies, you would think, even to this one. At least that's what it reads to me.
And the halacha certainly is not like this.
You never
The
know.
halacha is not like this. The halacha means you can't go out with friends. Right?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, that's what we usually say. Question, by the way, is how many friends is a lot of friends? A little variation on that, okay?
No, but if friends were having,
but you're right.
if friends were having a dinner, let's say, without music, right? They're just friends. They're having
Yeah.
the music. Come over. We're
Correct.
going to make a nice meal for tonight.
Right. So really, the halacha, it's okay. People sometimes are knowing not to do that because it's also psychologically, people need to feel a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So,
But of course everything is lakula in this area. So
Yeah.
some people say no.
quick.
Yeah, especially
Okay.
after 6-7
Right.
months.
Right. So, but it gets further murky because, as you see in a moment, because the Gemara is going to say, well, guess what? There's another brisa that seems to say something a little different. So, right,
Now there's a mesve right
right.
after
So,
this, right?
or another maimer, I should say. Macy says the Gemara Simcha Ula Mareus. It's not important whether Ula Simcha Ula Mareus or Simcha Smear is the same thing. Lamed Yom. So, Kasha.
So I want to be clear. He's saying even for parents, right? You go to a big simcha with music and everything after 30 days. At least that's the mesve, yeah?
So the Gemara says Ula Simcha Mareus Lamed Yom. So the Gemara said, well, this seems to say that you could go right away. So the Gemara says Kasha. So first we say, oh, we don't have an answer. Now we have another version, okay? Ameimer Masne Hachi. You know, maybe the first version we just read with Rabbi Machana was saying Simchas Moreus is also Aser. It's possible this first version was saying it's Aser,
Right.
and now the second version we're going to read is where it's going to say it's Mutter. That makes more sense. First version says it's Aser, Jack arguing like Jack argued that there's less reason to go,
Okay.
and then we have the next statement that says, but you can go after 30 days, you don't have to wait for 12 months. So the Gemara says Kasha. Now we have a second version. Ameimer Masni Hachi. Amar Rabbi Bachana. The second version of Rabbi Bachana says Lo Simcha Moreus Mutu Likonis Lialter. So the first version says Aser. The second version is the one that says, as I explained before, I got confused a little bit. The second version says you can actually go Simchas Meres right away. Don't even have to wait 30 days. Forget 12 months. You don't even have to wait 30 days for anybody. So that's very makil. So the Gemara says, wait. V'yatanya l'simcha shloshim u'mrei shloshim. So now we quote the same quote as before, only we have a little different. L'simcha shloshim u'mrei shloshim. We had before l'simcha u'mrei shloshim yom, but then we have it says 30 days. You got to wait 30 days. It's not even talking about for parents. It's talking about a regular ovel. The version we're just saying now says a regular ovel has to wait 30 days to be past shloshim to go to simchas moreus. No, I'm sorry. The version we're saying now, according to the first version, Simchas Meres, you can go right away. And now we have a member which says you have to wait 30 days. So that's a kasha.
Right.
And in this version we have an answer. Ha biarisusa, ha b'puranusa. So the Rashi and the Rishonim explain that this was a group that made meals, and then you had to reciprocate. So I guess someone has to start. So whatever was the season begins, the meal season, the rotation begins. The first person has to invite his friends.
Okay.
So it wasn't like it could be like 3 people, and the first guy invites the 2, and then the next month the second one's got to reciprocate. So therefore, When you have to reciprocate, it's keeping up with the Joneses. It's less of a simcha.
I see.
So the fact, and you feel a social obligation to do so.
But it's a social pressure.
It's a social pressure to do so because he invited you. You have to invite him back, right? Don't you have this all the time? He came to my dinner, I got to go to his dinner. He came to my shul's dinner, I got to go to his shul's dinner, or similar kinds of scenarios. So therefore, if it's a case where you're making that initial outreach to other couples or families and you're getting together, so as an avel, you have to wait 30 days.
I got you.
If you are the one who's doing the reciprocity, and you were invited before you became an avel, and now for waiting 30 days, right? You risk the social obligation of opprobrium of the fact that they're going to 30 days waiting for your meal. So then that's okay miyad. That's how they respond.
And not for parents, of course.
But parents is parents is not even for discussion.
Right.
Okay, so that's about Simchas Moreus. That's why you hear all the time Simchas Moreus. It's this unusual term that comes up in the Gemara that's not really even explained that well. Simcha Suda Shosim Reim Vahuvim Zelazeh.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Next, I'll call Mesim Kulam Koreh Tefach. So for the kriya that we do for all avelim has to be 1 tefach, which is a tefach is 4 inches. Okay,
it's a big tear.
It's a big tear. Correct. It's a very big tear. Okay, and for a parent, it's actually even greater. It's achigalos libo. Okay. So sometimes you hear that they do kriya on the right side for other relatives, they do kriya on the left side for parents. It's really the left side is because that sheyigalis libo. Traditionally, the heart is on the left side, which we know biologically is not really exactly true.
It's more on the left than it is on the right.
But it's pointed more on the left side.
Absolutely.
Right? Correct. So it's not here, right? But it's here. Okay. When you do al chet, you do here.
Absolutely.
It's missing the heart usually. The heart's usually right about here, but it's close enough. So therefore, and why are we doing this? You're showing the tsar of the fact that you cannot emote with your parents, how you're broken, what the heart is feeling. That's when shigales libo.
Maybe they really cut your whole shirt till they could see your chest again. I don't know. It's possible.
Correct. Probably.
Yeah.
Correct. So, and in fact, we'll come to it that other garments for parents, it's not just one garment. It's other garments, right? The question if you have to do your undershirt. So, probably not. We'll come to that in a couple of lines.
He does have a picture of the original chalitza here. You can see, just like you said, he's got his whole shoulder, his whole upper line.
Yeah, that's it. And it's a toga.
Yeah,
so it's some kind of toga.
Yeah.
Think of this as the people you see in India.
No, yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Pakistanis when they walk around with their old-fashioned robes, types of things.
Yeah.
Gandhi, correct.
Gandhi.
But you even see it sometimes today, especially some of the women. They have these long, kind of flowing
Absolutely.
things. So think of that. If you can just, they would bare a shoulder. Makes sense. So, call Mason Kolam Kuret Tefach Alav Mal Chigalas Libo. Okay, why? So, why does it have to be a tefach? Because tefach is pretty significant, and actually many people don't know that. Sometimes people who are not that careful don't realize how far a tefach is. It's 4 inches. Tefach is 3.8 inches. It's a serious tear. With modern clothing, which are double wove,
it's very hard to do, obviously.
Correct.
Good razor.
That's why they use a razor.
A good razor.
Yeah,
They
use a
So they
razor.
do a razor to kind of start it, and then they do it themselves. Correct. So Amar Ravav, my Kroat says, "Vaychazek David bivgadav vaykarem." The David grabbed the hold of his garments and he ripped it, and it says, "Ve'ena chiza pachos mitefach." And the Gemara says, when he holds his garments and rips it,
Grab the hold of it.
so think of it that he's actually ripping the garment he's holding, and this is what you have to hold with you have to hold the tefach of your garment. Right? By definition, this is a tefach.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the source why it has to be a tefach. Obviously, you could argue and say that's not the pshat of the Tanakh. He meant he held the garment and he ripped it a little bit, correct? But the simple pshat is it's a good kind of rip. Okay, next. Al kol mesim kulam afilo lavish asara chalukim ena korea ela elyon. For other avelim, you only have to rip your upper garment, your outer garment, right? By the way, it's not a coat, it's not a winter coat, it's the outer garment that you wear normally inside the house. So it actually can make a difference if people, like for example, wear a jacket or don't wear a jacket. Our society is changing in terms of how our outer dress is. We're much more relaxed. But the bottom line is, it does not mean your undershirt, right? And it means one garment on the outside. However, al avi v'alimo kares kulan. For parents, you have to rip all the garments, okay? And which would mean, let's give the normal example: you'd rip a jacket and you'd rip a shirt.
That's not all your garments. That's just two of them.
Okay, but what else is left?
No, but you have maybe six shirts and all this.
No, not all the shirts, not all the shirts that you own in your drawer.
All the ones you're wearing.
All the one that you're wearing.
Areas of clothes.
Yeah.
Right, and actually, for a parent, if you change, you have to rip the next garment if you change during Shiva.
But during Shiva.
Right. I mean, any Avel will tell you the hardest thing is you're wearing mamish the same garment, 7 days. First thing you want to do when you get up there, besides taking a shower, when you get up, is you want to throw the garment out.
It's the same outer garment we just said.
Well, I'm saying, but the outer garment, whatever it is not so much a jacket, but a shirt.
Your shirt, yeah.
I don't know. Most people don't wear a shirt for 7 days. Okay, so and then the Gemara adds v'apik rasuso enama keves. So the question is what this apik rasuso is. But a lot of Rishonim say it's basically your undergarments. So in other words,
what's he say? Rosho? Sha'al Rosho.
So some Rishonim say it's some kind like a scarf that you put over your head of some sort. That's what Rashi says, correct. Yeah. But other Rishonim say it actually refers to the garments that are underneath. So the answer is we don't do kriya on either. You wouldn't do kriya on some kind of garment, some kind of scarf you put over your head, because that's a headgear, right? Doesn't mean like I know there are people sometimes in the winter they wear a scarf in the house. I guess that would be a garment. The scarf is big enough to be considered a garment, probably big scarf at least. But this is more, think of it as a woman's scarf who puts a scarf over her head. That's not included, even though it's really worn as a decorative type of garment. It's a scarf over the head. And other Rishonim say, the Ramban and the Aruch and others say that this refers to undergarments. So you do not have to rip your undershirt for a parent even. Okay, so what we said before about Achigalas Libo, you don't actually have to have the heart showing out if you're wearing an undershirt today, right? And I think I once told you that I saw in the Art Scroll book, it says you have to, some people say rip on your talus cotton, and for a parent you have to rip on your talus cotton, and I think what he meant was like you have to think of the Hasidic talus cotton that they wear over their garments. That's really a garment. Right?
It's an outer garment.
The one that we wear underneath it is more closer to an undershirt. Right? So as a matter of fact,
it says elyon, so it's an outer garment, right?
Correct. But for a parent, a kores kulan.
Yeah.
So even for a parent, you don't have to rip your undershirt.
Right.
And I don't think that people rip their tzitzis underneath, okay, or the talus cotton underneath. And who does this apply to? Echad ish ve'echad isha, both men and women. Okay. And Rav Shimon Lazar Omer, who isha koras is a tachton, umachsira le'achoreha, v'chozeres v'korata to elyon. So when it comes to ripping a garment for a parent, they had multi-layers in those days. So a woman would rip the undergarment, the lower garment before. It does not mean tachton like underwear. It means a secondary garment underneath. She would then reverse it, and then would rip the first garment, the outer garment. That's for tznius. What today they do many times is they will either turn it around, or usually what they'll do is they'll bring pins to baste it up. There's a certain level of tznius.
Women don't have so many garments today, some of them, right? Let's say.
However many garments they have, correct. But those today, what normally they'll do is they will bring like pins or safety pins to kind of baste it together. Okay. Okay. Akola Mesim, okay, this is a little more difficult. Akola Mesim Kulan, Ratza Mavdil Kame Safa Shalo, Ratza Eno Mavdil. Okay, what's Kame Safa? So this is like, think of a hem around your neck, okay, and I guess you have to think of like a t-shirt of some sort, or some kind of, I don't even know how to apply it to a
Well,
toga.
you think the Kohen Gadol and all, they had a, it said, one of the
Tunic.
Kattan had like a, it said it had to be even sewn up around the edge, remember, which
Correct.
I guess was the ephod, whichever it was,
Right.
one of the...
So if you think about a V-neck for a moment, so there's one shita that if you're going to simply rip the V-neck further, right, then it's not going to be clear that it's a kriya. It's going to just simply look like a lower cut V.
I see.
Right? That's one shot. So in other words, you can't rip it in the actual V of the natural break. The second shot is that you can't start the kriya inside after the hem. And this is more like a t-shirt or even a V-neck t-shirt. In other words, the hem is much thicker. So you say, what I'm going to do is I want to do the kriya over the heart. So I've got the shirt here. I'll start the kriya here.
And you can't do that, it says?
So for other mason you can. For a parent you can't, because that's not really a kriya. That looks like more of a hole. It's not going to be clear that that's a kriya as much for a velus. So for a parent, we're much more makbid in terms of that,
Sure.
and therefore you have to start the kriya from the top. So that's the two approaches. So this is called kame safa. Safa is the lip, right? It could be either of them. So I'll call a mason kulam ratza mavdil kame safa shalo ratza ina mavdil. Alavi vavimo mavdil. For parents, you have to really separate through the actual hem of the neck. Okay. And then Rabbi Yehuda Omer called kriya sheina mavdil kame safa shalo eno a keler shel tiflos. So Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's not just the parent. Everybody. Okay, everybody, if you do a kriya that doesn't break through the hem of the neck, that's called kriya of tiflus, is like silliness, worthlessness, I don't know, idleness, ridiculousness. Actually, in its worst case scenario, it means idol worship.
Right.
Right. So you've done nothing, so to speak. So, Amar Avahu, what's the reason? Amar Avahu, my time Rabbi Yehuda. Why does Rabbi Yehuda make such a big deal about it? D'chsiv, vaychazik babegodim vayikarim l'shnayim krayim. So, this is from the beginning of Sefer Malachim. It says, I think this is the death of, probably death of, who dies in the end of Sefer Malachim Aleph?
Elisha the prophet rent his garments upon seeing his teacher Eliyahu.
Correct.
Oh.
Okay, this is where they get separated.
It's Elisha.
Eliyahu goes up in the chariot. So he rips them into two. So he rips them into two rips. So it sounds like a tautology, a repetition. Obviously, if you rip them into two pieces. So Imash Mishnema Vaikarim Eni Yoder Shem L'Shnayim. If I ripped it, I don't know. They ripped it twice. Even if I rip it in half, it doesn't have to rip the whole garment. So it means. But it could mean, but the rip looks clearly that I ripped it into two, as opposed to either the scenarios I gave you, the two pshatim that the Rishonim say. One is the V-neck. If I extend the V-neck, you don't really know that it's a kriya. You just think it's a greater V. Or if I have the polo shirt, the round neck, and I simply begin it after the hem,
It still looks like just a
it still looks like a tail. Looks like a hole more than a rip.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, is this the source for Kriya in general? That Elisha, what he did for Eliyahu?
Either that or from David.
Remember a couple of weeks ago,
Right.
I think it said David tore his thing when he heard about Shalom or something.
Correct. So if you like, I think the Ached Yosef do Kriya, don't they? Don't, when they come back, remember, this is the same laws about Avelis are really going to be about hearing bad news.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So when the Achay Yosef come the second time and they begin searching through the
when they get arrested at the very end of the
I'm quite sure
parsha. I think you're right.
Right. So
when they go to arrest the Binyamin, I think you're right. It says Vayikra B'Gedei. Definitely.
Story of Megillah Esther. Right. So Kriya was a universal symbol of mourning. For us, in our modern sensitivity,
just before the Shalach, the last
But it sounds like we're really very specific about how the Kriya is to be done.
Ah, that's true. Just before
We're very
Bayit.
specific, it
Right?
sounds like.
Well, we're very specific. It has to be at least a tefach.
Yeah, just before
That's
Bayit.
correct.
A couple of seconds.
Right. Vayikrusim lasam,
Yeah.
Vayamosi shachamro, Vayeshivu ira.
Exactly.
So, what has happened here is we formalized. Look, Avelis is halacha. In many cases, formalizes certain things we do.
Sure.
Okay. Everything in halacha does that. Matzah. Okay. What did the Jews eat when they came out of Mitzrayim?
$29 a pound.
They didn't pay $29 a pound. But actually, what it actually looks like they happened, they were ready to go, right? And they had all this dough.
Oh yeah.
And then suddenly the Egyptians garshu atam Mitzrayim and didn't have time. So they had dough. So what did they have to make some kind of ad hoc way to cook the dough? I don't know. Hard
to figure out what they did.
Whatever they did, it's not your matzah, okay? It was not your matzah. But halacha,
like the
Sfaradim do. Correct. Well, we've formalized this kind of thing into what we call matzah. We've formalized bitterness into morar.
Sure.
Okay. So all I'm saying is we formalize sadness into the laws of Avelis.
Yeah.
There are certain ways we do it. You can't simply say I'm sad. You're sad, but you do it. You carry out certain nihugim.
Here's how a Jew is sad.
Right. Here's how a Jew is sad. And the way a Jew is sad, you do kriya.
Do with a matzah?
No, it's more like a laugh apparently.
Right. I actually would like to get one. I told him. I said.
And apparently, my father told me in Europe it also used to be like that.
No,
too.
but it can't rise. What makes it?
No, it's flour and water. It's flour and water,
No,
and
but you don't want it to rise. That's the whole
think
point.
of it as wraps. You ever see wraps? Think of it as you buy
I
wraps in the
always
store.
look at them as somehow chametz.
No, but a wrap today is chametz that you buy because there's other ingredients. But think of making a flour and water wrap, and that's when a wrap can bend. They bend. They sit in plastic. That's going to be matzah.
But my father told me that this is the way matzah in the old country was like.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Well, good. Let's go back to the old country. I would like to find
soft
one.
matzah, a little chewy matzah.
Yes.
Sounds nice.
Rabbi Herschel Schechner is a tshuva that he was asked. He says, yes, 100% is kosher. I haven't found one. I said, I'd like to find one with a good Sfaradi ashkacha. To once in my life have the Sfaradi matzah.
Wow.
Okay, I can't have the kidneys. I can have the matzah. Okay. So, at any rate, so yes, we do kriya, but the point is it has to be a kriya for tefach. Where do you do the kriya? How do you do the kriya? It's got to be very clear and so forth. Okay. Okay. Let's just go a little further here. Okay. So. Al kol hamesim kulam sholel lacha shiva uma'acha lacha shloshim. For all of the mesim, you can sholel is rough stitches, like basting stitches. After Shiva, you can actually baste up the Kriya. This is a society where garments were recycled and reused, like the society that I grew up in and you grew up in, right? How many patches did your pants have when you were kids? You had patches on the patches, because if you got a new pair of pants, they'd need a patch anyway sooner or later. So after Shiva, you can baste up in rough stitches, and Achar Shloshim, you can actually Ma'achar means actually to sew it up properly. For a parent, the kriya can be basted up in rough stitches, but you can never really sew it up completely. You're not allowed to sew it up completely. Ever. For kriya for a parent. The symbolism is very powerful. You can never replace that loss. Right? It's a funny kind of thing because in our society, people move away from parents. People begin their own lives. The kesher to parents is clearly not as strong. I'm not saying your kesher, my kesher, your children, my children. I'm saying in general, the connection becomes less and less. The older they get, they move further they move away. They come, they visit, and so forth, but it's not the same. So this tells us how important it was. And on this, the Gemara says, "Va'isha shalasa li'alter mipnei kvoda," and a woman, she can baste it up right away because of kvodo isha. That's why I said even in the days of the Mishnah and Gemara, they would do the kriya, And if they didn't turn it around, they would actually do rough stitches on it to make sure that she was covered up. Okay, makes a lot of sense. Okay, okay, one more. Kiyasa Ravin or Rav Yochanan, and Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. He said the name Rav Yochanan, and vice versa. When Ravin came back to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, he said the name Rav Yochanan. Al kol hamesim ratzu kriya b'yad, ratzu kriya b'kli. For all the mesim, you can use a utensil like a razor, a scissor to make the kriya. Al aviv alimo b'yad. Okay, so when it comes to a parent, it has to be done b'yad, and the funeral directors are makbid. They can start it for you. Right, but they actually make the oval for a parent do the kriya themselves.
Is this, by the way, Ravina, same as Ravina, or is this just?
This is Ravin. This is Ravin. This is Ravin.
Else.
This is Ravin. Ravin is well known as one of the. He's much earlier than Ravina. He travels back and forth from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, and you will see it frequently. He comes to Kiyasa Ravin on Rav Yochanan. He comes back to Bavel, and he says, "This is what I heard from Rav Yochanan." Rav Yochanan was the famous Amora, lived a very long time in Eretz Yisrael, probably the last of the really great Amoraim, because after that the community goes down. So Ravin is still going back to Eretz Yisrael to learn what he can. Comes back to Bavel with this Eretz Yisrael Dikatayra, and that's what it means. So he would go. He is called. A couple of them. They're called Nechusi. Nechusi comes, Nochas means to go down. They would go to Eretz Yisrael, and then they would go back to Bavel. They were spiritually going down in the level, what we call Yerida. Okay? There's more that goes into this Gemara, which we'll let roll over till next week. But you see, this actually is these are short pieces, but they're really very, very, very important pieces, because most, with the exception of the cholates, everything that we learned is really practical. Very practical.